สวัสดีครับ
ผมดูดีครับ
ผมเดียวครับ
ครับต้อนรับเข้าสู่กีตาร์ไทยทีวีนะครับอินเทอร์วิวชาแนลนะครับ
ครับผม
ครั้งนี้เป็นตอนที่2ของสัมภาษณ์คุณมาร์ตินเทเลอร์ครับ
เป็นการสัมภาษณ์ที่ยาวนานมากครับ
วันนี้มีเล่นโชว์ด้วย
ใช่ครับ
ก็ไปติดตามชมกันเลยนะครับ
So for example if I want to be like a good jazz guitarist what should I do what should I start with
Well, one of the things about jazz, unlike rock and roll or even blues, is that it's not a guitar-based music. That's the first thing a guitar player has to remember. So, with rock and roll, and most pop music that came after and everything, it's based around the guitar. A lot of the harmonies, a lot of the melodies as well are very much around the kind of minor pentatonic, which is a very guitar thing because it all fits under the fingers. Then when you start playing jazz, you hear like something like Charlie Parker, and you want to start playing some of these. You know, all these kind of things, they're not designed to be played on the guitar or any instrument particularly. So you have to think of it in a way separately from the instrument. You have to think of it as the music. A lot of rock guitar players ask me, they'll say, if I'm going to learn to play jazz, what scale do I need to learn? And it's not as simple as that. You have to learn, before you even start playing it, you have to get a lot of knowledge of harmony and the language of the, it's another language really in music. And you have to learn the vocabulary, you have to learn the grammar of putting sentences together, and that takes time. That takes time. And the way I did it really was, even though I could already play the guitar, I'd just sit there and I'd start. I always had music in my head. You know, I had my own iPod in my head years before iPods were invented, and I used to replay things that I'd heard in my mind, and then I'd start imagining playing it on the guitar, or I'd change it around a little bit in my mind, and I'd compose a piece of music in my mind, and then when the school bell went and I'd run home and get my guitar out, I'd start playing. So that kept me in very good stead, because then when I was older, I found that I created a lot of music in my mind before I even played the guitar, so I composed music without the guitar. And what I try to do when I talk to guitar players is get them to develop a flow of the music from the music they're hearing and they want to play into the guitar, because very often a brick wall suddenly comes up. And the best way to do that is to train your ear. By
ear training?
Yeah, by listening, you know, coming up with ideas in your mind and then playing them on the guitar.
Convey it through guitar to instrument.
So the music has to come from you first. Guitar doesn't. Nothing comes out of the guitar.
Yes, right.
Nothing. When people say to you, "Your guitar sounds great," does it? Oh, yeah, right. Okay. It's got to come from you. So, and the problem is this. You have to get this flow, and if you don't get that flow going the right way, if the flow comes the other way, the guitar plays you instead of you playing the guitar, and that's when you end up just playing the same old licks that you know, and you go, "Oh, I've got all these great ideas in my head." I end up playing that same old thing that I've been playing for ages. I can see you smiling because all guitar players, we all have the same problem. But it gets less and less as you train your ear. You start chipping away at that wall, and it goes away. Every so often it comes up again, and you have to chip away at it. But when you're on a good flow, when it's all really connecting and working, there's no barrier there, and your ideas just flow straight into the instrument.
And practicing?
Very often that's just like relaxing, because you'll notice that all guitar players, another thing that guitar players will have, you think to yourself, I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go in the other room and I've got 10 minutes. I'm going to just play the guitar for 10 minutes. You sit down, you're relaxed, you play, you start playing, and suddenly someone's knocking on your door. Where are you? You know, an hour's gone past and you don't even realise it. That's because you've stopped thinking, because making music's got nothing to do with thinking. You've stopped thinking, you've just got totally into it, and there's like you've become one with the guitar, with the music, and that's really from relaxing. That's what you have to learn to capture that feeling and that moment, and then when it comes for real, when you're on stage or if you're in a studio when you're recording something, you have to create that moment of being relaxed so that the music flows. And that's ear training, and it's just from lots of time. You can do things like practicing. You can do things that seem really stupid, but you can do things like just think of a little phrase. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Diddly da ba da. Da. You copy what you're saying, and then after a while you can do this. Now what I'm doing there, very often I ask people to say, "What am I doing?" They say, "You're singing along to what you're playing." Well, actually, it's the other way around. I'm playing along with what I'm thinking. And I was just vocalizing that for you, because I'm not a singer, as you can tell. But I'm just vocalizing what's going on in my mind. So it's not that way around. If I'm not singing along with what I'm playing, it's the other way. The flow goes that way. So even doing silly things like that, sitting around and just singing along, playing along with your singing, and trying to copy on the guitar any things that you sing to yourself. After a while, it trains you to get that flow going between your musical ideas, and the guitar. And the more you do that, the more you chip away at that wall, that barrier. And the distance between you and the guitar gets smaller.
Smaller.
Yeah, shorter and shorter. It's like having a cable connecting, one end to another. The cable
it's getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you still practicing?
Well, I don't practice as such. I don't sit down every day and play. So, sometimes I go long times without playing. But you see, I started playing when I was very young. I was only 4 or 5 years old. So I don't think that much about having to practice, because I can carry on from where I left off very easily. If I don't play the guitar for 2 weeks or so, it isn't a problem.
So normally when you play guitar, especially jazz, you kind of combine the finger style into your style of playing.
Yeah, well, I started out playing with a pick right at the very beginning, because that's what all my friends did. It wasn't until later on, when I decided I wanted to play solo, that I realized I had to play fingerstyle. So that's how that came about, and that just developed over a period of time. But now I play both. When I'm playing solo, I play fingerstyle, but if I'm with a band, I play half and half.
Half and half.
Yeah.
But you love to play like in and out of tempo, and also the chord and melody.
Yeah, harmony is my big fascination in music. How you can have a combination of notes making up a chord that creates a mood, and then you can change just one note, a semitone, and it creates another mood.
Could you show me a little bit?
The most famous, of course, the most basic one, is the difference between just a major chord, just a triad, the root, the third, the fifth, the root on top. But if you change the third, just a semitone down, becomes a minor. Complete change of atmosphere. So I've done things sometimes with children. I've said, what's the happy chord and what's the sad chord? Which is this? Is that happy or sad? Is that happy or sad? And it's just and even if somebody isn't trained in music, people can hear that's the happy one, that's the sad one. So that's the most basic example of that. But just by changing one note in that chord, and only changing it to its neighbour, which is only one note away.
Yeah.
changes the atmosphere and changes the mood. I've got two of these guitars. This is a guitar that I designed with Mike Vanden.
Mike Vanden.
In Scotland, and Mike and I have known each other for a long time, and I had an idea for this guitar, and we spoke about it, and one day we just got together in the workshop, and we spent a few days just talking about the kind of guitar I wanted. I wanted a small jazz guitar, and I wanted it to be a jazz guitar. It's only a 15-inch body, it's got a spruce top, but I didn't want to have the middly sound of a jazz guitar. I wanted it to have a big bass, a big sound, and I also wanted it to be able to sparkle on the top more than a jazz guitar.
And this one is called
sustain, of course.
This one is called Artistry.
This is called the Martin Taylor Artistry.
Right.
Yeah. So I have this one. This is the first one I had. When I first had it, it was all like this.
It's a prototype. This one is prototype.
This is the prototype. This is the very first one. And what happened was we experimented with the top. The top was quite thin, and it had a sound post as well. But when I travelled, went from one climate to another, the guitar didn't like it.
Yeah.
It used to move.
It's very difficult to take care of.
Yeah, so sometimes I'd arrive somewhere and it was almost impossible to play because the top had gone down a little. So he made me another one with a thicker top, which is actually the better guitar of the two. Although I prefer it to this one, but it's only like tiny difference. Most people wouldn't hear the difference. So he put another top on this, thicker top. So this is the one I travel with.
And also you have the flat top one, acoustic one?
I have, the only flat top I've got is a vintage guitar. I've got a 1929 Martin 00045, which is a very collectible guitar. I have that. I sometimes play that guitar.
Maybe in the studio?
Fun. In the studio, but I play that for fun because it's hard to play. I have quite a few vintage guitars. I have a D'Angelico XL from 1936, which sounds great. It's a great guitar, but it's hard to play. It's very hard to play.
With a vintage, right?
Yeah, and I have a few others, old Epiphone, old. I've got an old Gibson L4 Eddie Lang model, which I love to play. But again, they're very hard to play, and they're not practical for many reasons for me to use, really.
How about your amplifier?
Well, I always use the AR.
AR?
In fact, there's one here. I've been using these for a long time. I was introduced to these by the man himself, Udo Rosner from Germany, and he gave me a couple of these amps to try out, and I've been using them ever since. What I want when I'm playing through an amp, I don't want it to sound like the amp. I want it to sound like the guitar. So I don't want people to listen to it and say, "Oh, that's Martin Taylor playing through a such and such amp." Or so. In a way, I don't actually want people to really hear the amp. I want the sound to be pure. And what I can do with this amp, I mean, you can do many other things as well, is just have that very high quality sound that you get from that and from the speaker. So it doesn't colour the sound. This guitar has a preamp in the bottom there with a couple of small batteries. So a lot of the sound I get from that anyway. So it's got a magnetic pickup and a piezo pickup, and I sometimes use a microphone as well. I use a MyLab microphone, which is a Swedish-made microphone, and I use a small T-Rex tube-driven reverb. Just has
it's a stomp box.
4 settings.
Yeah, it's a stomp box.
Yeah, stomp box. So that is what that does. Apart from giving me the reverb that I like, just having that one little valve in there, it just does something to warm it up slightly. It's very slightly, and probably I only know the difference, but I can feel the difference. And when I'm playing, it has to sound right for me. It doesn't matter what other conditions are involved in it. If I can't get the sound that I want, it makes such a difference. This is all to do with giving me the freedom to be able to express myself musically. So with this setup, I'm the music the guitar sound, the music that I hear in my head is the music that's coming out. You know, I don't hear a Strat in my head, or a Les Paul guitar. That's not the sound in my mind. So if I am playing one of those guitars, as good as they are, it's a bit lost in translation. You know, it's gone somewhere along the way. You know, it's like speaking. It's like you speak and then somebody else's voice is coming.
So we have a few questions left. This one is very interesting. What do you see when you look at the today's jazz?
Well, I think one of the great steps forward for jazz has been jazz education. So you can actually go to colleges. This is something that didn't really happen when I was playing. You can go to colleges now and you can be with like-minded students and be taught by world-class instrumentalist teachers. And you have everything at your disposal. You have musicians are all making their own DVDs and tuitional things, giving advice. Equipment has improved tremendously for all instrumentalists. Recording is better, live sound is better, all of these improvements. The only thing I think about that is there isn't as much individuality amongst players. There isn't. You don't hear very many people that stand out individually. You hear they stand out as players, and you listen to people and you go, "Wow, you know, they're fantastic." But you don't hear. There's not the same kind of character, different characters. It's almost as if you can tell which school they've been to. So, and that's not the problem of the schools. That's the problem of the students, because they've in some ways they've taken too much on board. They're not using that as a tool to dip in and out of, to use in their development and as individual players with individual voices, but maybe taking things a little too literally. In some ways, they've got too much information. They've been given too much information rather than finding out a lot of things themselves.
Okay, could you please give us like a few jazz lessons?
Lessons?
Or maybe like your song?
I can tell you one thing that I do, which I actually got from piano players, and you can use this for everything you do. If you're playing solo jazz guitar, is, as I said, I didn't really have any guitar players to listen to get that inspiration from at that time, and I listened to piano players, and I heard these piano players that played using tenths, you know, stride, as I said earlier, playing stride, and I still use as a great mechanism. I don't play it all the time, but it's a great mechanism to use as a guide for when I'm doing things. Is using tenths, like on that stretch on the piano, like the Blue Monk. It's a good thing to know. So instead of playing scales, like just play them in those tenths. And try and get that in your mind, and then it's amazing how much you can then you know, you can solos you can develop from that. So I would use that a lot as a mechanism for. I'm exaggerating that a bit, but that's all tense, because I keep that in my mind. I break away from that a little. Don't stick right to it, but it's a good mechanism to know. Even in some of my tunes, like tune you say true,
right?
There's a lot of tense in that.
Right.
Tense.
Again. Yeah.
It's the same principle.
That's lovely.
And it's a good principle to have in the background, and you can base a lot of things around that. And that's it's just good. It's a good thing to know and to be able to use to draw upon.
So lastly, do you have anything to say to your fans at GuitarThai?
Just it's great to be back in Thailand again, and it's always a pleasure to be here. And I hope some of you come and see me play, come and see Alison and I play. And I hope it's not the last time I'm going to be here. I certainly plan to come here more often, as long as my impresario here in Thailand, Haki, keeps inviting me. I'll keep coming back. It's wonderful. It's a great pleasure. And I know there's some fantastic guitar players in Thailand, and I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of my knowledge of guitar players here. So I've got to keep coming back.
Okay.
ครับผมเป็นยังไงบ้างครับ
ผมเชื่อว่าสุดยอดมากครับกับมือกีตาร์ท่านนี้หลังจากที่เราเคยได้ดูคอนเสิร์ตเขาเกือบ5 ปีที่แล้ว
ครับคือบทสัมภาษณ์ของคุณมาร์ตินเทเลอร์ครั้งนี้ผมคิดว่ามันเป็นด็อกิเมนต์ที่ดีที่สุดอันหนึ่งที่เราได้เก็บไว้อยู่ในมือเพราะว่าเขาไม่ได้แค่สัมภาษณ์เฉยๆมันเป็นการสอนหนังสือเลยทุกอย่าง
มันเชิงวิชาการครับ
ใช่มันคือสิ่งที่ไว้เป็นอ้างอิงได้นะครับ
แต่นี้คุณน้อยเราโรงเรียนคอร์สแจ๊สแล้วครับ
ใช่ ก็ไว้ติดตามกับศิลปินครั้งต่อๆไปนะครับในกีตาร์ไทยทีวีช่วง International นะครับ
ก่อนที่จะลากันไปผมยังมี1 เพลงจากคอนเสิร์ตวันนั้นซึ่งให้ชมกันด้วย
ซึ่งตัดมาให้ชม
ครับ
นะครับก็ยังไงก็ติดตามชมภาพบรรยากาศคอนเสิร์ตในวันนั้น1 เพลงเต็มๆเลยนะครับ
แล้วเราก็จะลาไปแต่เพียงเท่านี้ครับ
ครับสวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีครับ
Maybe the song is called The Good Life because the man was called Sashi the Step. Yes, the good life lets you hide all the sadness you feel. You won't really fall in love, for you can take the chance. So be honest with yourself. Don't try to fake romance. It's a good life to be free and explore the unknown. Like the heartaches when you learn you must face them alone. day.